Ladies and gentlemen, gather around and prepare to have your mind completely blown by one of the most bizarre twists in Hollywood's ever-churning rumor mill. Because today we are looking at the utterly astonishing claims that Rachel Zegler, the actress handpicked to bring Disney's beloved Snow White into the modern era, may have quietly orchestrated the downfall of the very fairy tale.
Was an in-depth piece, like a behind-the-scenes piece, talking about how they've been in a full meltdown about this girl for a couple of years now.
There was an in-depth piece, like a behind-the-scenes piece, talking about how they've been in a full meltdown about this girl for a couple of years now. Rachel Zegler burst onto the scene as a Broadway and Hollywood darling when she landed a standout role in that classic musical film revival of West Side Story, cementing her position as a fresh face with a bright future when Disney tapped her to become Snow White.
But Rachel Zegler made it so hateable that you really sabotaged and took hundreds of millions of dollars from the studio. I don't know how anyone would ever want to go into business with her.
Outsiders gushed about her voice, her stage presence, and that intangible Disney it factor, while fans imagined a graceful princess who could blend old school Disney charm with a modern twist. But Rachel Zegler made it so hateable that you really sabotaged and took hundreds of millions of dollars from the studio. I don't know how anyone would ever want to go into business with her. Ever, but that was only the beginning of a tale that some say has taken the darkest turn in the Magic Kingdom's recent history. In a series of interviews, promotional snippets, and increasingly sarcastic sound bites, Rachel seemed to throw the entire concept of Snow White straight under the carriage. She called the original story weird. She joked about the prince being a non-factor, and she seemed dead set on rebranding the innocent maiden and her seven dwarfs as something wholly unrecognizable, and now she's trying to reinvent herself because there's
Hello, Disney. You're gonna have to redo your film again because this woman is a pig, and you fired Gina Carano for far less than this nonsense.
And our lead actress hates our film, our actors, our storyline. An empowered prince of verse mightier than thou, Snow White, who favored boss lady leadership over the tender dreamy singing we all grew up with. Of course, reinvention is not always a bad thing, but fans quickly cried foul, claiming the actress was turning her nose up at the classic fairy tale itself, biting the hand that fed her, or as some have even more dramatically phrased it, attempting to bludgeon the very fairy tale that made Disney a household name. Hello, Disney, you're gonna have to redo your film again because this woman is a pig, and you fired Gina Carano for far less than this nonsense. Then, almost in lock step, social media lit up like Disneyland's Main Street electrical parade. Thousands upon thousands of tweets, posts, and TikTok rants popped up, with everyone from hardcore Disney aficionados to casual moviegoers calling Rachel Zegler condescending, mocking, and far too dismissive of the original Snow White's timeless charm. She's now bragging about the success of Snow White, which is a movie that's going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. And mainly because of her, and because nobody wanted to support her. Hashtag sprang into existence overnight. Not my Snow White Gate, and a dozen others for the self-appointed defenders of Walt Disney's first masterpiece. Suddenly this actress, who had once been hailed as the embodiment of sweet sincerity, was portrayed as the villain of her own story. But the real kicker, the thing that really shocks me about this story, Disney and all these.
We are now at a 1 out of 10 on IMDb for the new Snow White, and it couldn't happen to a better person. What is the lesson to be learned here with this Snow White disaster?
Yeah, we had more dwarfs than we did viewers in most of these theaters. And as you know, there were no dwarfs other than some CGI weird generated version of them.
Yes, the outspoken news personality and media commentator delivered her own sharp critique on her podcast accusing Rachel of waging a war on the very movie she was supposed to star in. Behind the scenes, you guys know as well as I do that those executives like Spielberg are looking at that, saying Rachel Zegler can F right off. Kelly's remarks turned heads as she pointed an accusatory finger. This woman seems to hate the movie she is in. She hates the fans that it is for, and she is taking down the entire Disney legacy in the process, or so she purportedly said. Stirring the pot even further, the question exploded across the airwaves. Was Rachel Zegler truly exposing Disney's archaic approach to fairy tales? Or was she just serving up sound bites that spelled doom for the film's box office future? We are now at a 1 out of 10 on IMDb for the new Snow White, and couldn't happen to a better person. What is the lesson to be learned here? With this Snow White disaster, we had more dwarfs than we did viewers in most of these theaters, and as you know, there were no dwarfs other than some CGI weird generated version of them. The drama amplified when fans started noticing a peculiar timeline. Rachel's interviews seemingly became more and more pointed, doubling down on her criticisms rather than softening them. She cracked jokes about Snow White not dreaming of love, insisted she was turning the story on its head, and in the process alienated Disney's core audience of families, fairy tale enthusiasts and nostalgic grown-ups who still hum "Someday my prince will come." I don't really care what happens with this movie. I really hope her career is pretty much over. I'd be thrilled to see that. I can't imagine. I mean, Christian, you tell me, but is she not seen as box office poison now because of all of her antics? You know, it's kind of a mixed track record. She's still fairly young. Her West Side Story debut was not a hit, and that was a Spielberg movie, so that was kind of surprised. But if you're a studio, if you're a director, if you're a casting director, you've got to think twice or three times before hiring her. Listen, she's talented, she's attractive, she's got skill, but there are a lot of actresses in Hollywood who bring all that to the table and are not going to absolutely sabotage your work. She was plucked out of obscurity by Steven Spielberg. All you say is thank you, Mr. Spielberg, and you keep saying that for the next 50 years. Somewhere in the swirl of this fiasco, a conspiracy theory took root, perhaps.
Do you know, how hard it is to find an attractive young woman in Hollywood who can act in sin? It's not hard. Who just isn't going to offend half the country. There'll be 25,000 more just like her knocking on the same doors that she had opened to her. She had the opportunity of a lifetime, and instead of being humble and grateful, she was entitled and a snot. And I will look forward to her not getting cast in any more movies for a long time until she actually does learn something about humanity and humility.
Even had a chance at success, but these guys at Disney, they're not that bright. They're not that smart, and we see that because they can't come up with any new IP. Why not write some new movies? You guys sit around, you have billions of dollars. They keep going back and rewriting the classic. Allegedly, insiders claimed that Disney bigwigs were none too pleased with her remarks, especially after it turned out that test audiences, focus groups, and even everyday folks scrolling through social media started turning on the project. But so the theory goes, they could not muzzle her for fear of looking punitive or controlling. Suddenly you have a public relations nightmare in the shape of a witty, outspoken star who seemed determined to point out every flaw in the original narrative that made Snow White a household name in the first place said. She hated Snow White mocked the fact that there was a prince and that she falls in love as opposed to leaning into her own power. We could go on at the same time. Eagle-eyed fans discovered leaked set photos that further fueled the flames of controversy. Snow White frolicking about with a group of assorted fantasy beings, not the 7 dwarfs many expected, complete with the rumored explanation that Disney had assembled dwarfs all together for a more inclusive magical beings approach. The chaotic images left fans reeling. Some praised Disney for trying something new, while others were outraged at what they perceived as a total abandonment of beloved characters. It did not help that actor Peter Dinklage had voiced his own skepticism about how Disney was updating the dwarfs, which only made the entire project feel more fraught with potential missteps. Do you know like how hard it is to find an attractive young woman in Hollywood who can act in sin? It's not hard, like who just isn't going to offend half the country. There'll be 25,000 more just like her knocking on the same doors that she had opened to her. She had the opportunity of a lifetime, and instead of being humble and grateful, she was entitled and a snot. And I will look forward to her not getting cast in any more movies for a long time until she actually does learn something about humanity and humility. Megyn Kelly, never one to keep her thoughts to herself, seized upon these leaks as further evidence that Rachel Zegler was at best misguided and at worst sabotaging her own film with the help of a production team that could not decide how to modernize an 80-some-year-old story for a generation raised on streaming platforms and social media. Some of Kelly's commentary purportedly labeled
That is totally uplifting and the right way to be woke, Link, when you actually canceled the roles for the marginalized population because just putting them on screen is somehow racist.
So I remember back in 2023 when this was going on and all the little people making videos saying, well, wait, there's so few roles for us in Hollywood. We're being passed over for this. You could have cast 7 little
Peter
people.
Dinklage.
Exactly. They're like, Peter Dinklage, you're rich. We're not. We're trying to be extras, or, we're in Johnny Knoxville's Jackass if we're lucky. And so for them, they're like, you're not going to cast us to be inclusive and progressive.
Frey posting reaction videos dissecting each new snippet of footage and each fresh interview. One viral clip highlighted Zegler's comments side by side with the original Snow White's innocent lines to show a stark contrast, while another took to comedic jabs by putting cartoon speech bubbles over the actress's face, reading things like "I never wanted a prince" or "I am rewriting Disney's legacy, so deal with it." Did the dwarfs make it or no? Well, the CGI dwarfs did, of course. That goes back to the original controversy where Peter Dinklage, a very talented little person actor, said, "Why are we doing that? We've hired a Latina actress to be Snow White. That's progressive, but you're going to hire little people to play the dwarfs. That just seems like a step backwards." And then, of course, Disney instantly buckled and said, "Okay, we're going to add magical creatures." And then the picture of the magical creatures leaked online and everyone just had an absolute blast laughing at it. So the magical creatures are here in the movie. The CGI dwarfs are here in the movie. It works to a degree, but it's certainly going to be a financial hit for Disney, that's for sure. Meanwhile, the rumor mill went into overdrive with self-appointed insiders claiming that Disney executives privately expressed regret about the entire direction from the modern storyline to the stars' attitude. On the other hand, an entirely different faction of rumor lovers suggested Zegler was simply trying to
it's the old, it truly is go woke, go broke, but also don't alienate half of the country when you're putting out a product meant to appeal to all.
Have the absolutely jaw-dropping suggestion that Rachel Zegler may have had bigger career aspirations that conflicted with Disney's squeaky clean brand, seeing as she had also been cast in other roles that skewed more action-oriented, or at least less, shall we say, princessy, and I will look forward to her not getting cast in any more movies for a long time until she actually does learn something about humanity and humility. Could it be that she was never truly on board with being the face of a fairy tale whose main claim to fame was innocence and romance? Perhaps some fans said she rolled her eyes at the idea of praising a story she considered archaic. But the question remains, could any actress who knowingly accepts the part of Snow White really be shocked that she is expected to promote the movie's timeless appeal? The friction reached a tipping point after the widely publicized remarks from Megyn Kelly further galvanized supporters and detractors of Zegler. That is totally uplifting and the right way to be woke. Link when you actually cancelled the roles for the marginalized population because just putting them on screen is somehow racist. So I remember back in 2023 when this was going on and all the little people making videos saying, well, wait, there's so few roles for us in Hollywood were being passed over for this. You could have cast 7 Peter Dinklage exactly. They're like, Peter Dinklage, you're rich. We're not, we're trying to be extras, or we're in Johnny Knoxville's Jackass if we're lucky. And so for them, they're like, you're not going to cast us to be inclusive and progressive. While Kelly is no stranger to controversy herself, her willingness to call out Rachel for hypocrisy, narcissism, or insincerity resonated with a segment of the public tired of seeing beloved characters reimagined in a seemingly negative light. Others, however, championed Rachel for attempting to update old-fashioned tropes that no longer resonate with 21st century ideals, especially for younger audiences who are far more conscious of consent, equality, and female empowerment. I can't get over the sense of entitlement and to show up to criticize the bosses, to suggest that they're white supremacists, to demand that more money, like you're not getting paid adequately, to rip on the plot that you've been asked to embody as the actress, like she's just one big ball of entitlement, which is what we all hate. As the debate raged, word spread that Disney may have tried to reel in their stars' interviews, perhaps limiting how many sit-down chats she would do, or possibly coaching her to tone down the dismissive remarks about the original cartoon. But by the time these measures allegedly took place, it was too late. The damage, in some opinions, was done. The film's release was delayed, pushed back, or quietly shuffled through the schedule, leaving many to wonder if it would land with a triumphant splash or a catastrophic belly flop. 25,000 more, just like her, knocking on the same doors that she had opened to her. She had the opportunity of a lifetime, and instead of being humble and grateful, she was entitled and a snot. Then we arrived at the question: was this entire fiasco orchestrated? Does Rachel Zegler truly hate Snow White, or is the entire scenario just the perfect storm of out-of-context quotes, fan overreactions, and entertainment media fueling a narrative for clicks and views? Certain netizens have posted side-by-side videos insisting that while Zegler's tone could come off as abrasive, she also said many positive things about working with the cast and crew. It's the old you. No, it truly is go woke, go broke, but also don't alienate half of the country when you're putting out a product meant